Your dog has slept beside your bed for 11 years. Then one night, he doesn't come. You find him underneath a table in the quietest room of the house, somewhere he almost never goes. The next morning, he barely touches his food. By afternoon, he doesn't follow you to the door. And 2 days later, he's gone. Afterward, every strange thing he did feels different. The hiding, the silence, the way he stopped following you, it almost looks like he knew. Stories like this are everywhere. Cats disappear. Dogs seek out one person. Wild animals leave their group and never return. So can an animal actually know that its life is about to end? Scientists have documented animals behaving around death in ways that make that question surprisingly difficult. But first, there's a problem with the dog. His behavior may have had nothing to do with understanding death. Take away what happened 2 days later. Now look at him again. He isn't eating. He sleeps more. He moves less. He stays away from everyone. Animals do this when they're sick. When the immune system responds to illness, it can change behavior along with the body. Movement drops. Appetite disappears. Exploration slows. Social interaction can decrease. Researchers call this sickness behavior. And suddenly, the mystery becomes less mysterious. A dog hiding because it knows death is coming, and a dog hiding because it feels terrible can look almost identical. He doesn't need to think, "I'm dying." He only needs to feel something is very wrong. That could explain our dog. But in Scotland, cameras recorded something sickness behavior could not explain, because the animals whose behavior changed weren't the ones dying. On December 7th, 2008, an elderly chimpanzee named Pansy was dying at Blair Drummond Safari Park in Scotland. She was more than 50 years old. 3 chimpanzees were with her. Her daughter Rosie, an adult female named Blossom, and Blossom's son Chippy. As Pansy weakened, Rosie and Blossom stayed close. They groomed her. They watched her. Then Pansy stopped moving. The others inspected her face and limbs. Chippy touched her neck. Rosie remained near her mother's body through the night. Researchers were careful about what this meant. Behavior cannot tell us that chimpanzees experience death exactly as humans do. But Pansy was the one who died. The others were the ones who changed. Something about the difference between Pansy alive and Pansy dead mattered to them. So perhaps some animals recognize death. But recognizing death in someone else creates an even harder question. What exactly have they recognized? Imagine finding someone completely still. They could be sleeping, unconscious, injured, or dead. The important difference appears later. A sleeping individual gets up. A dead individual doesn't. It doesn't eat again. It doesn't rejoin the group. It doesn't respond tomorrow. For animals that live for years around the same individuals, that pattern can happen more than once. Researchers studying death cognition have argued that some animals may recognize at least parts of this distinction. The body has stopped functioning, and the change doesn't reverse. Now go back to Rosie beside Pansy. Even if Rosie understood that her mother would never get up again, there is still another step. Pansy died. I am like Pansy. Therefore, this can happen to me, and eventually it will. That step sounds small. It may be enormous. Humans tend to bundle these ideas together. If you understand death, you understand that you will die too. Animals may not. A chimpanzee could learn that a dead group member never returns, without ever thinking about its own future death. But then there's an obvious problem. Animals desperately avoid being killed. A mouse runs from a cat. An antelope runs from a lion. A chimpanzee avoids a dangerous fall. If they don't understand death, why work so hard to escape it? At first, that seems like powerful evidence. Then the argument collapses. Picture an antelope with a lion 20 feet behind it. The antelope doesn't need to understand mortality. It needs fear. Run, now. Pain makes dangerous things worth avoiding, makes predators worth escaping. Memory makes threats worth remembering. None of those systems require the thought, if that lion catches me, I will permanently cease to exist. The antelope just has to run. Natural selection can produce an animal that fights desperately to stay alive, without producing an animal that understands death. And this changes our original question. Maybe the choice isn't the dog knows he's dying, or the dog knows nothing. There may be something in between. And an elephant named Eleanor helped show us what that middle ground might look like. On October 10th, 2003, researchers in Samburu, Kenya, learned that an elephant had fallen near the wire bridge area. Her name was Eleanor. She was the matriarch of a family called the First Ladies. Her trunk hung almost motionless. She moved forward in small steps. Then she fell again. Another matriarch named Grace approached. Grace belonged to a different family. She tried to lift Eleanor. Eleanor stood. Then she fell again. Grace tried again. The next day, Eleanor died. The observation was striking, because these elephants were known, individually, in their relationships, had been followed for years. Grace could clearly detect that. Something was wrong with Eleanor and changed her behavior in response. But Grace didn't need to understand death to do that. And neither did Eleanor. Eleanor's body itself was giving her information. Which brings us back to the dog. Yesterday, the dog could climb the stairs. Today, he stops halfway. Yesterday, he finished his food. Today, he turns away. Yesterday, he followed you into the kitchen. Today, standing takes effort. He doesn't need to understand death to notice that his world is changing. His legs feel different. Breathing may feel different. Movement may hurt. He may know, I'm weaker than yesterday. I can't keep up. I need somewhere safe. That is much more than knowing nothing. But it is still different from, I am going to die. And when researchers recently compared death-related behavior across many different animals, they found another clue. The animals with the most complicated social lives were also among those, showing the most complicated responses to death. In 2026, researchers compared death-related cognition and behavior across 135 species. They found that species with more complex social systems, including dolphins, elephants, and chimpanzees, showed more complex patterns of death-related cognition than closely related species with simpler social lives. That does not mean dolphins know they will die. It does not mean elephants contemplate mortality, but it suggests that understanding death may come in layers. One animal notices that another has stopped responding. Another learns that the change is permanent. Another may connect dangerous injuries with that outcome. Another may understand its own vulnerability. And then there is the final step, knowing that the same ending is coming for you. That is the step we still cannot see, and proving it creates an almost impossible problem. Suppose you wanted to prove that our dog knows he will die. You would have to separate that knowledge from everything his body is telling him. Pain, weakness, breathing, difficulty, fear, exhaustion, then somehow distinguish my body feels wrong from my body feels wrong because my life is about to end. You can't ask him. And scientists obviously cannot create fatal situations just to test the question. So we are left with behavior. Pansy stops responding. What did Rosie understand? Eleanor collapses. What did Grace understand? A dog hides under a table. What does he know? We can see what animals do. We cannot directly see the experience producing it. Which brings us back to the room where we started. The dog is underneath the table. The house is quiet. You're standing a few feet away. At the beginning, the question was, does he know he's going to die? Now the better question is, what does he know? Maybe sickness changed what he wants to do. Maybe he knows standing hurts. Maybe he knows his body isn't doing what it did yesterday. Maybe the quiet corner feels safer. Or maybe there is another layer of understanding we still don't know how to measure. Pansy's companions show us that some animals respond when another individual crosses from life into death. Eleanor's case shows how strongly a social animal can respond when another enters a state that is clearly wrong. And evidence across many species suggests death cognition may exist in layers rather than as a simple yes or no ability. What we still don't have is strong evidence for the final connection. I am going to die soon. Maybe some animals can make it. Right now, we cannot prove it. But that doesn't make the dog under the table less interesting. It makes him more interesting. Because somewhere between feeling your body change, recognizing death in another animal, and understanding your own future, death is a part of the animal mind we still cannot see. And maybe that dog wasn't saying goodbye. Maybe he simply knew something was changing. We just don't know how much he knew. If these are the questions you want to explore, subscribe. And if you've ever seen an animal behave differently near the end of its life, tell me what happened.